Hello. Welcome to another episode of Season 16 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, the theme is B movies for C students. We're taking a break from the current trends toward elevated horror and examining the history of horror B movies and how they've developed over time. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So we got another week in the 2000s. I'm starting to feel a little bit at home in this post-90s world. It took a minute, but I'm here.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, though, because I didn't even think about it until you brought up, I think it was last week, when you were talking about how basically last season was just the 90s that we had watched.
Yeah, I definitely have like a soft spot for stuff, media in general from this time, just because, yeah, it was a formative time for us, I guess. And it was also kind of unique in that it was the beginning of more, at least for me, like online community type stuff.
Oh yeah.
Where like you could find out about movies on message boards or groups, chat rooms and stuff like that. Like it felt like the world of media was opening up in a way that it hadn't for both movies and music.
Yeah.
And I think that had some influence on movies at the time, but we can get more into that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely had to, for sure.
So this week we're doing a movie from 2003 called Bubba, Ho-Tep. And I think I had maybe vaguely heard of this at some point, but I didn't know anything about it and wasn't sure what to expect.
Yeah.
And so I went into it doing no research whatsoever and then read about it later. Mm-hmm. And man, was I confused.
So my name's Tom. I picked out this film. I read beforehand. I felt bamboozled, but I read beforehand, watched the film, and then was confused as well. So mine's kind of the opposite, where I knew about it before. And I was like, this doesn't sync up to what I was reading about whatsoever. So, but Bruce Campbell, it's a Bruce Campbell film in my opinion, so it kind of worked out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and in reading some of the backstory for this one, I was fascinated. I was just like, how did this movie do? Like, what was the market for it? Like, I was doing all this after the fact, and it was a very unique experience. But it was interesting in that this movie originally only had a few copies actually produced, like of the actual film. And it did a lot of festival touring to build up word of mouth. So you couldn't just go to your local theater and see it, as far as I know, at any point. Like, they successfully created hype. And people had talked about it online, and then it already had a bunch of people who were excited about it when it came to DVD. So that, to me, feels like a really unique thing from this time in movie history, because it was almost like, going all the way back to like the 50s, when it was a struggle just to get your movie in front of people, to get people to care about it, doing publicity stunts and stuff, to now we've almost gone the other direction, where the internet has opened everything up about everything. So by creating that sort of limited supply, you're almost cutting back the other direction to create demand. And I'm really starting to think more and more of the larger story that we're telling this season is about finding novel ways to take advantage of different avenues of marketing and distribution. And it's been like the story of B horror movies really is just about people coming up with creative ways to get an edge with either like a new technology or distribution channel or something. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. So what you were just saying, I think it's also, for me, one of the ways I see it is like not having to rely on the big production studios that has their ways and their paws and everything, and which they produce good stuff. So it's not talking bad on mainstream media or anything, but I mean, we all know, like, you work with, like, try calling AT&T customer support. Like, you work with a big company and it's just awful, but call, fucking mom and pop, internet, and you talk to the owner kind of thing, and that's not always better, but it's just nice that there's not always going to be rules to follow. I think of like with IT, I work in a smaller IT shop, and when you were at a bigger company here in town, like if I needed to get like a new monitor, I could literally go to the storage room and just get it. If you needed a new monitor, you have to pay the request. You have to, there were steps and things in place, and I think what we're definitely figuring out here is how, first off, you can get this done without having to bend over backwards to everyone. You can make things yourselves, but you just have to put in the extra work. But also, I will say, and this is going to make me sound old, but like there was something special about the finding something on the internet in the early days, because like you're saying, like it's open now where you can find anything you want to search. It's all online, but I don't necessarily, if it was harder to find things back then. So like if you did get like on, a forum and you saw this movie that everyone was talking about, like you almost it was almost just finding like a diamond or so, like a hidden gem or something, and you're like, wait a second, what is this movie? I got to see this movie. I got to see what's going on. And I kind of miss it a little bit because now I could use Siri on my phone to say, hey, what's Bubba Ho-Tep about? And like, it'll tell me, back then it's like, I can't find anything on this, but they're all saying that this is a good film. I got to check it out. So it's a cool marketing, but it was fun marketing. If it was marketing or not back then, finding gems was always a fun process.
Absolutely. And I've done a lot of thinking about music that way, because I feel like at this point you were at this like sweet spot where you could find out about bands, but only by people talking about them. Mm-hmm. And then CDs were like relatively expensive if you were a teenager.
Oh yeah.
So then you'd have to like save your money and then like go to a CD store and see if they could order something for you. Oh, yeah. If you were like really, into it. And then something about being feeling like you were the first person in your town to discover a band that you thought was really amazing was just this super fulfilling experience.
Yeah.
And also immediately created like a lifelong bond between you and that band in a way that it has been completely and totally lost, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
As we have gotten into the world of Spotify just constantly serves you up recommendations of stuff you probably will like at least a little bit all day, every day. Like there isn't that joy in discovery anymore. And I think that applies to a lot of media, but obviously music's the one that's kind of the bigger thing in my life. And going, I guess, more into movies and you talking about sort of how all that plays in, I think that we got into a place at this point where people realized that the internet was a powerful way to get into, I guess, more of the marketing side of your movie. So you could start using the internet to help build that hype in a way that didn't have any of the traditional costs. And so you were almost like incentivized to do things that the Hollywood system wouldn't allow, because that makes for better talking points to get people interested. And so a thing that I kept coming back to with this movie, and we'll get into it more later, is there were some real weird, like random references in this one that I feel like the script would never have sold in Hollywood at the time. But it's exactly the type of, when you read the blurb of what this movie's about, you are immediately curious and want to know more about it. And that almost is kind of going back to like that same idea of, was it American International Pictures and the way that they would do the mock-up of like the movie poster with the title and then test people's reactions to it. Yeah. I feel like, in the earlier days of internet, being everywhere, you could kind of do similar types of things where like, what's going to get people talking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it also just the fact that like, the companies, once they realize like, hey, we don't have to spend a ton, especially during that time, on advertisements. I think it's also, I feel like, I don't know when it happened, but like before like cookies and cache and all that too. So it wasn't like reading all that. And so you were getting actual recommendations. Anyways, I'm sorry. That's my old. I'm getting old. Yeah.
So yeah, obviously we have lots to talk about with this one. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we can get into the. If the CIA couldn't kill Kennedy with 3 shooters in 1963, then I have a hard time believing that slow-ass old mummy could have done it in 2002, but that wasn't even the biggest plot hole in this movie details.
Love it.
In 2002, Vitagraph Films brought us Bubba Ho-Tep, a comedy horror written, directed, and co-produced by Don Coscarelli, and based on a novella of the same name. This movie tells the story of an elderly Elvis impersonator who claims to actually be the king himself, and his friend Jack, who claims to be JFK, who join forces to rid their nursing home of a resurrected Egyptian mummy who is eating the souls of the old and defenseless. This movie was made on a budget of around $1 million and had gained a cult following by the time it became available on DVD due to its popular reception at various film festivals. It can currently be streamed for free with ads on Tubi.
Perfect.
So I think the first thing that stood out to me about this one was that the film quality really didn't feel that bad. Like there were some telltale signs of a movie being made on a low budget, but just as far as camera work, sound, lighting, all that stuff, this one did not feel like it came from an earlier era to me, in the same way that it's like, oh yeah, if you watch a B movie from the 70s, it looks a lot like a non-B movie from the 50s or 60s.
Right. Yeah. Which makes kind of sense, getting into 2000s, which, filming was definitely more expensive back then, especially than it is now. But like, equipment is getting better, easier to get for smaller companies. But with $1 million budget, you could also handle that a little bit better. But it definitely had like the shooting style of like a Bruce Campbell film, in my opinion. There were some shots that were very similar, like it's almost like it's attached to the chest of the character, and so you see just right in front of their face. And I like it, but it was just like, there it is, there's that shot.
Yeah, definitely a lot of like paying homage to the Evil Dead movies, I think. And I feel like it's interesting because we started off watching a couple movies with like late career Bela Lugosi and
Boris Karloff.
Yes, Boris Karloff. Thank you. And now we're seeing one that's made more recently, and they're still kind of even doing the same thing, where it's a late period sort of horror icon that they're using in one of these B movies to kind of generate some buzz around it.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's cool that they obviously took some inspiration from his previous work.
Yeah, they definitely. But I mean, you almost have to, people watched it just for him alone, So
yeah. And honestly, since I had done no reading or anything about this ahead of time, it took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that was Bruce Campbell.
Oh, really?
Because there was so much hair and makeup and the big glasses,
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking for it. So it wasn't until quite a bit later when you see more of his face. But
like when he meets the Elvis impersonator that he like changes lives with. That's I could definitely see that. I could see it for sure. I mean, he has all the makeup on and glasses covering his eyes. We're not going to notice his voice. We're not.
Yeah,
some people will, but.
Yeah, but the costuming and stuff, again, I thought was pretty good. Mm-hmm. The one thing that did feel more, or like a little more low budget, I guess, were that it wasn't very many characters. It wasn't very many locations. Most of it was just a few old people inside a nursing home, which is a relatively easy thing to make. But it also had, in my mind, like a very early 2000s sense of humor.
Oh, okay. Like almost a little bit more, not vulgar, but like raunchier.
Yeah, trying to like push it a little bit and like be offensive, but also make a lot of references. Mm-hmm. And like the whole his friend JFK's room like all the pictures and stuff and like the little model of the book depository and everything. Like there was a bunch going on there that the movie didn't call out, but it's like if you read about the JFK assassination and then you went back and looked at that, you'd be like, oh, and then if you rewatch the scene, you could get down like a rabbit trail on that. And that feels like an early 2000s thing to me.
I can see that. Yeah, for sure. Just also, I feel like just, you know, I don't know. I kind of feel like just having, you know, Jack, JFK, just that character in itself, you know, how it got to where he is kind of thing is also kind of early 2000s a little bit. Right. It's a little bit, we still had dreams back then, maybe. We still had imagination. So, but funny nonetheless, you know? Yeah.
It also surprised me how much just like dialogue there was in this one.
Yeah. It was a talker, man. Yeah.
And had you seen it before? Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha.
No, I know it's the same thing though.
Yeah. And I feel like they actually put a lot into the dialogue that were like Elvis and JFK references, which was kind of entertaining if you've gotten really, you know, if you know a lot of the background on either of those. Like it was a clever script.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was like laugh out loud funny though, for the most part. It was a lot more references, like in clever references than it was, you know, big comedy moments, I guess.
Yeah. And I think I'm with you on the same, like there were definitely situations that I found funny and definitely situations that I thought, okay, this is like Evil Dead-esque, like makes sense. But like, I didn't necessarily, I don't know if there were any standout scenes that made me like have me cracking up. There was definitely some that had me chuckle a little bit, but going to the references that you were just talking about though, I definitely like references it films. Like I think, you know, find those Easter eggs, like it's kind of fun. But I think like the easy Easter eggs are the ones that for some reason just bothers me. So like hearing references to like peanut butter and banana sandwiches. I mean, like everyone knows that. I mean, like there's restaurants. That's the name of the sandwich is like the Elvis, and it's that, you know. So
yeah, and I mean, like I feel like Bruce Campbell's character was very all in on Elvis. I like that it didn't ever really give you any type of definitive answer on if he was actually Elvis with dementia or an elderly Elvis who had changed roles with his impersonator, or if he was just the impersonator who was old and with dementia. But yeah. And there weren't a lot of answers in this movie about anything, really.
Yeah, I mean, this movie almost felt like it was two different films. Like the first, it was so bad. The first section, I mean, yeah, you see like the mummy and stuff at the beginning, but then like when it's in the nursing home, like it went on so much went on that I was like, oh wait, this is supposed to be, you know, have mummy or like have some horror aspects to it. But it legit felt almost like a two-parter. And then once it got into, you know, with Elvis and JFK like hunting, or like, you know, their realization that, you know, what's going on, it's like, okay, this is the movie here. And it was like 40 minutes into it, like 30-40 minutes into it.
I would say about 60% of my notes on this one are from the last like 20% of the movie.
Which I thought was decent. Like that's what we're there for. Like the first ones were like hearing his background. It was almost like we were being given information on stuff that doesn't matter necessarily. Like, I don't know, like it's okay for you to just say like it could be an impersonator that has dementia. Like we don't need to hear the whole backstory, but if they're trying to fill time, I guess. But
and they were also trying to turn a novella into a movie, and I'm sure there was like a lot more content, a lot of stuff they had to cut out to make it fit, and so some of it was probably more important in the original story. But I guess the big thing is that they realized there was this Egyptian mummy that was being transported through the area, and then it got stolen, and then the people who stole it crashed into the river. And so now the mummy comes out and is just feeding off the souls of the people in the nursing home that's nearby, which will be enough to keep it, alive forever. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so but nobody will believe them. So it's just Elvis and Jack getting all dressed up to go fight the mummy. Mm-hmm. And that's when the action happens at the end.
Yeah.
And it just, it was kind of funny. The final battle, just with the old guys and everything.
Yeah.
It was definitely more comedy horror than it was horror.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, like, this movie definitely felt to me almost in a way, like, which makes sense it being early 2000s, but almost like a 90s kids movie or like a 90s cartoon in a way where, like,
but way more dick jokes.
Yeah. But, like with, Kate and I will be watching, some cartoon thing that, that our kids watching. And she's like, she'll make a comment like, I can't believe that, why would they have a character like this? Or why is this character doing it? And it's like, Kate, we're watching turtles that got into, slime and now they're Ninja Turtle. Like, that's not, so in this case, it's like, yeah, there's definitely a guy who thinks he's JFK, and it's just so cartoonish that you can almost get away with it. But that was definitely the case with the in fight scene, But I also kind of respect that they didn't like give them some sort of power up or something, that they were like super powerful fighting this super mummy. Like, it was two old ass dudes fighting this mummy like old ass dudes in a way. It was just it worked in my opinion for how goofy this film it was. It definitely worked. It was definitely comedy. But
yeah. And did you have any like specific scenes or anything you wanted to dig into with it? Because I have kind of some more general comments, I guess.
No, I do have just a quick question though. So in the film, when Elvis is starting to realize what's going on, I think it's after he fought. Yeah, it's definitely after he fought the bug. Him and JFK are right on it's right at the beginning. They're doing they're figuring out what's going on, and it's after the nurse had to come in and put the cream on Elvis's area, and he got excited.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, he's outside looking for, I think, the mummy or something, and the nurse comes out and was like talking to him real nice, and he was just like a huge dick to her, just insanely dick. Did he ever like make up for that or like say sorry or anything? I don't remember seeing her as a character, like how much we saw her in the first half of the film. I was just curious. I didn't remember if she did or not, but it was like, wait, did they ever like clear up?
I don't think so.
I think that was funny if they did.
Yeah.
So I was like,
I think at that point he was kind of like, well, I'm on a mission and nobody's going to believe me, and I got to figure it out, do my thing. And
because he was so mean. He was so mean. And the other thing too is you feel bad about that because she had just got her ass chewed out by like the administration or something. Like something happened with that. And it was just like, God, she just got knocked down twice. So like
she's having a bad day.
Yeah, she had been. What do you think? She wants to put this cream on, some old dude's no. But that's all I really had. I was like, what the heck?
That's funny. The thing I wanted to ask you about was, do you think this movie was better on paper than on film?
Oh, yeah.
Like, because I just, in thinking about it, it seems to have like a pretty good reputation online. Mm. And I kind of wondered if like, had it just gone to theaters, would the first batch of people gone to see it and then been like, that was boring, and that would have been the end of it? Like, do you think that it got like the hype and the online discussion and speculation because of like how weird it was if you just tried to sum it up, and then people were just so excited for it to like finally get to see it that it couldn't fail, know?
Without doubt. I mean, I feel like that's the case for definitely the case for some, cult following films for sure. Cause like I'll watch them and I'm like, I don't get the hype around this is not that good or whatever. But no, I definitely think that if it was in theaters directly, all in theaters and not an event, then I think it would have been it may have been one of the films that like would have been forgotten about for like 10 years and then come back when the internet started getting, had more information or whatever. But I don't think it would have been as big or as popular, as well liked as it is now, if it had done that.
Yeah, I kind of think it might have been like a flash in the pan.
Yeah. Yeah. But granted, Evil Dead was similar, and it's not the same makers, but it, and that was the 80s, so maybe, I don't know.
I think there's probably something about being the right age at the right time.
Yeah, that's true.
That makes like a big impact on people, but
that's why you got to do those. You got to ask the teenagers what kind of movies they want, and then they can come up with Poe or Edgar Allan Poe, whatever that film was.
Yeah, right. So I had actually just pulled up the Arkoff formula because I feel like we end up referencing that a lot, and I feel like that'd be a good thing to look at for these last few movies that we do. But if anybody doesn't remember, that is from Samuel Arkoff, who was one of the founders of American International Pictures. They made lots and lots and lots of B movies, and he talked about how he had his formula for making successful, memorable films, often targeted at teenagers. And so he had it as an acronym based on his last name, A standing for action, which I feel like this one didn't have quite enough of. R for revolution, which is like a novel theme or idea. I think this one was like, it was definitely a very creative concept. K for killing, O for oratory. Like there was notable dialogue, when Jack was talking about Lyndon B. Johnson's men coming after him. That stands out. Fantasy, which is, it says acted out fantasies common to the audience. I don't know that one applied so much. And then fornication for sex appeal to get the teenagers. So I feel like this one really didn't land on all of those in the way a lot of the movies have this season. It really was just kind of a unique one-off. And I think that makes it a good addition to our journey through the history of B-horror movies.
Yeah, I think that's, and one of the things when watching this, like, it's definitely not the greatest film, but what I was thinking of while watching was like, this is the beauty of B horror though. Like we don't have to, like, if we were to stay with mainstream films or, whatever, that's when you get like the, I Know What You Did Last Summer movie and Scream coming, like you get
Thor 7.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So this is the Arkoff formula, which, could definitely be put into other, it doesn't have to be horror or anything, but like what you get is like the mainstream cookie cutter shapes from time to time. And I like the fact that like, if you and I could just convince a couple Canadian Baptists to give us money, we can make a film and it could be ours.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we talked about in the opening episode of this season was that we were probably going to get some really good movies and some really bad movies, but we would at least get a lot of really interesting movies out of this season. And that's just the thing, is like the B movie tradition means that creativity in whatever form can still find its way into movie making. Right. And that's kind of what we've seen over and over again. So would definitely rank this one high on the creative, more so than on one I want to watch again.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's it. We did it. Bubba Ho-Tep. We will be back next week with our first movie from the 2010s as we continue through the decades looking at different B horror movies and talking about how that genre has evolved over time.
Perfect. I can't wait until next week when we record this episode.
Who even knows where we'll be 7 days from now?
Yeah. Eating a peanut butter banana sandwich. Priscilla!
Taking care of business.
Yeah, TCB, boy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.